Welcome to the Podkey summary of LLM search using Core Spotlight from WWDC 2026. Today is really about one idea. Apple's Spotlight Index is turning into something a language model can use directly instead of just something a human searches through. The interesting part isn't only that the model can query your app's data, it's how developers can shape that interaction so it stays accurate, efficient, and useful on real devices with real limits. There's also a practical layer here around evaluation, UI updates, and filling in missing metadata, which is where this goes from neat demo to something you could actually ship. At the center of this is Spotlight Search Tool, adopting the Foundation Models Tool protocol. In plain English, that means a language model can directly ask an app's core Spotlight index for information and use that context to answer the user. It works across iOS, iPadOS, macOS, and visionOS, and the setup is intentionally light. After importing Core Spotlight and Foundation models, developers can add it to a language model session with basically one line of code, which is one of those small details that matters because it lowers the barrier to actually trying this. The workflow is the familiar tool calling pattern, but it helps to say it out loud because this is where a lot of the behavior comes from. If the model decides it needs outside data, it generates arguments for a tool call. The tool runs the Spotlight query, sends back a description of the results, and then the model reasons over that output before it answers. And that may not happen just once. The model can make multiple tool calls in a row before it finally gives the user a complete response. So developers have to be ready for successive replies and intermediate steps, instead of assuming one question leads to one lookup and done. One of the more important caveats is that not everything stored in Core Spotlight is equally readable to the model. Some metadata, like raw text or HTML, may be stored in a compact form that's searchable but not directly available for the model to inspect. So you can end up in that mildly frustrating situation, where the system can find the right item but still answer with missing detail because it can't fully read what's inside. The workaround is for developers to provide richer attributes through the index delegate, so the tool can hand the model more complete item data during execution. That bridge between searchable and actually understandable turns out to be pretty important. A big theme running through all of this is scoping. Guidance profiles let developers restrict which kinds of search capabilities the model should use, like people, dates, or locations. That helps reduce hallucinations when the app's index doesn't really support certain relationships. If your data knows about places and timestamps but not social connections, you don't want the model confidently improvising a people graph out of thin air. This matters even more on-device, where models have smaller context windows and less room for wandering. A focused guidance profile, paired with a concise set of searchable attributes, makes it much more likely the model will ask for things the index can actually provide. Sometimes the smartest move is giving the model less to juggle. There's also a more advanced mode here beyond basic query and return results. Spotlight Search Tool supports pipeline searches, where the model can request a series of computation stages over a result set. So instead of pulling back a pile of items and doing everything the hard way, it can ask for things like a count, an average, or sentiment scoring as part of the pipeline. That's more efficient, and it also keeps the model from drowning in raw data it doesn't need. Apps can even register custom pipeline stages. The example here is kind of charming, a happiness score generator that runs sentiment analysis on hike notes. So the model could get a pre-computed score instead of every underlying note, which is cleaner, faster, and probably easier on the context window too. Another practical problem is reference resolution, especially around people. If a user says something like, "Who else was on the trail?" the model has to know which person that refers to before it can filter anything correctly. A contact resolver can provide the right user identity metadata, so the tool can search with the intended person in mind. That helps clear up ambiguity without forcing the app to donate full relationship data about people into Spotlight, which is a pretty sensible middle ground. On the interface side, Spotlight Search Tool returns replies as an async sequence with query tokens. That gives apps a way to refresh the UI incrementally as batches of search results arrive instead of waiting for everything at the end. Using the token, the app can tell the difference between partial intermediate results and the final response. That sounds a little technical, but the user-facing effect is simple. The conversation can stay responsive, even when the search is large or the model needs a few passes to get where it's going. There's also a new delegate method called searchable items for identifiers that helps with a long-standing gap. Given an identifier, the app can retrieve the full CS searchable item during a tool call. That means Spotlight can do the finding, and then the app can hand over the fuller item details for the model to reason over. It's an important extension because it connects indexing for search with recovering complete content later, even at very large scale, including millions of items. And then there's the part every promising AI feature eventually runs into. Okay, but how do you know it's good? The evaluations framework gives developers a way to define datasets, expected item identifiers, and even expected trajectories. From there, they can automatically measure how well the model's behavior covers the index content. A metric like result coverage compares the identifiers returned in tool replies against the ground truth set. That makes it much easier to iterate on guidance profiles, searchable attributes, and the shape of the index data without relying only on vibes and a few lucky test prompts. What makes this whole bundle interesting is that it treats search, retrieval, reasoning, and UI responsiveness as one connected system. It's not just a model stapled onto an app database. Developers get tools to narrow the model's behavior, enrich what it can read, run efficient computations over results, resolve fuzzy references like people, and then evaluate whether the answers actually reflect what's in the index. And because on-device limits are part of the story from the start, a lot of the guidance here feels grounded in real product constraints instead of dreamland demos. So the short version is, Spotlight Search Tool makes app search data much more usable to language models, but the real craft is in scoping, metadata design, and measuring what comes back. It's a good reminder that the glamorous part of AI is the answer, and the useful part is everything wrapped around it. And yes, sometimes that includes teaching a model how to find a happy hike. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.